Hello again, I'm Larry Hamilton and welcome to my YouTube painting channel. Thanks for watching. Today we're going to do an oil painting, and it's a painting that's going to be on toned canvas, gray gesso toned canvas I should say. It's on 11 by 14 canvas, and the scene is a small church in a sort of a mountain meadow, I guess you would call it, in Cades Cove, Tennessee, which is near the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. It's a beautiful scene. It's got a lot of fall colors. I'm going to use some reds and oranges and greens and put a nice fall background behind this little white church setting out in the field. It's going to be painted in our November 20th, 2013 oil painting class. And I have a photo here that I'll show you close up. The photo is actually portrait size, and which means it's taller than it is wider. And I'm going to turn it into a landscape, which is a more pleasing type painting. Plus, it fits my cameras better, and it fits on YouTube better if you have a landscape size painting or picture of any kind. I also have done a value map, and the value map basically is a way of breaking a painting into large shapes. And while I'm doing that, I try to put the shapes into value ranges of a light value, a medium value, and a dark value. And on the this particular value map, I'm going to have a light sky, I'm going to have a dark middle ground, and a medium value foreground with some light highlights around the church. And you can see, I'll zoom in a little bit, I have a sketch completed here of the church. That's about all we have to do for the sketch. The rest of it's going to be foliage and trees and background and sky and some clouds. So the main architectural element here is the church. And it's a very simple drawing. So most of the students shouldn't have any trouble with it. I also want to cover with you the paints. We're using the Bob Ross standard paints that we always use. I will go over them here quickly on the palette. Titanium white, phthalo blue, Prussian blue, Van Dyke brown, Prussian blue, midnight black, Van Dyke brown, dark sienna, alizarin crimson, sap green, cadmium yellow, yellow ochre, Indian yellow, and bright red. I also have added a Grumbacher color called ultramarine violet, which helps me with some of the values and shadows. The brushes we're using are the standard Bob Ross brushes, the 1-inch landscape brush, the number 3 fan, the number 2 script liner, and I've added a number 6 filbert, which I like to use. If you watch my recent paintings, you know I've been adding a filbert to this mix of brushes. Today I'm going to also add a small flat brush. It's called a Dick Blick 1/2 inch Scholastic Golden Taklon. It has a very sharp edge. I use these typically in watercolor paintings to get sharp edges, but I'm going to use it in this particular painting to get sharp edges around the church and to make sure that it stands out and has some sharp edges. Oil paintings are a little bit tough to get very sharp edges unless you let the painting dry and then come back over it. You can get nice sharp edges, but I try to do this in one painting session, usually maybe an hour to 2 hours long, and so I want to have something that will give me some good sharp edges. So I think that's all I wanted to say before we get going, so let's get started on this thing. I'm zoomed in. Hope you can see the sketch. The sketch is done in white charcoal pencil from General Pencil Corporation. I think I mentioned that on one of the previous videos, but because I have a gray gesso primed canvas here, I need something that shows up on it, so the white charcoal pencil it does that job very nicely. So I can put a very simple sketch on and it shows up so I can know where I'm going, where the particular architectural elements are. So I'm going to start with my liquid white as usual, my landscape brush, 1-inch landscape brush, and we're going to just put in a little bit of liquid white for the sky area. The original photograph did not have any sky in it at all. So to turn this into a landscape, I actually have added some area at the top here with a nice little sky, and It makes a more pleasing scene in my opinion. So I'm going to pop on some of this liquid white up here in the top and bring it down to the area where we're going to have the tree lines start. This little church is nestled in a scene of trees that are behind it that are very beautiful in the fall. The color comes out and makes a very pleasant scene. So something like this, want to have the top of these trees have to have a melodic line. You've heard me talk about it before, where you don't have clones, you don't have duplicate humps or dips. You have some spacings and various widths, various lengths, and it's a nice pleasing line. You don't want a straight horizontal line, even though in nature you may see a straight horizontal line going across here. We don't want to paint it that way. It's not very artistic, and it's sort of boring, and the viewer will tend to lose interest fairly quickly. All right, let's put a little bit of, haven't cleaned my brush. I've still got liquid white on here. I'm going to touch my brush into phthalo blue and start picking up a little of this blue sky color, just a little. And I'm going to start putting it in here in the corners. And as I blend it, as I pull the brush left, you'll see that it lightens up. It gets lighter, from dark to the right, lighter to the left. I'm going to add just a touch of my dark sienna to get a little bit of gray down the color just a little bit. Gray, or a brown with the blue will tend to give you some gray. I don't want a lot of brown in the sky, but I do want to gray it down a little bit. Maybe even a touch of alizarin in here in some spots to warm it up a little bit. Usually I put a little alizarin in the sky down toward where the sky touches the tree line or whatever I'm painting there. Just a little gray, a little Van Dyke brown will give a little different color gray to the blue. I could use my black and gray it down, but I'm going to just put this in for now. So I have a sky that goes from blue, lighter blue, and then it sort of turns gray. And I have a little bit of alizarin crimson I've put in here to just slightly lighten the area above the trees. Like I said, this is a fall scene, and I'm going to dry out my brush now a little bit with paper towel. I'm not washing it out in thinner yet, I'm just drying it off. Come back and put a few horizontal strokes across here to kind of smooth out the sky. It's always a good idea to come back and maybe just fade the edges a little more, put just a little more blue in some spots here, and see if we can add some more texture to the sky. I will be coming back a little later and putting in some white clouds, a little heavier paint to help warm up the sky a little bit, and put in some very specific cloud formations up here. I could do some of it now by putting in some white, and I'm just using little X strokes here, giving myself a nice varied sky with some blue in it, some white, a little bit of brown to gray it down, and then a little bit of alizarin to warm up some of the areas down here. So I think that's about all I want to do for right now. I will come back and hit that again, but right now I'm going to leave it just soft and try that. Okay. Now, the trees. We have a lot of trees in here, and they're all different colors. They're greens, they're orange, they're ochre, they're yellow, rust-colored, all the colors that you see in a fall scene. And I'm going to get a smaller brush for this. I'm going to get my filbert out and use that to start making this row of trees across the back. Get my big landscape brush washed out here so it can be setting and not have to have a lot of paint in it. Okay, filbert brush. We're going to start with some trees. I'm going to start with putting some ochre down underneath my sap green over here. And we'll usually start with ochre in the brush instead of the green. The green gets pretty potent. I can also make some very beautiful greens with my cad yellow, picking up a little bit of my blues over here. You can pick up Prussian blue, add it to cad yellow and get one flavor of green. I can pick up my Indian yellow, put some down here with Prussian blue. I can add some phthalo blue, which is a darker color. If you see on the palette here, I'm sort of getting multiple colors of green, starting with my sap green, which is already a basic green color, and ochre, adding some cad yellow and Prussian blue and some Indian yellow and phthalo blue. And so these are just very nice colors that you want to put in a painting that has a lot of trees in it. Also, we have a lot of orange. So I'm going to take my cad yellow and my bright red. I'm going to get one color of orange. I'm going to take some of my bright red and Indian yellow and get another orange color here. So I can get sort of a rusty color. I can get a color that's got a lot of more yellow in it. And if I put yellow over my blue, I'll actually get certain colors of green. So in here I want to have just some areas that look like the trees are already changing. I'm going to mix it up, go back and just mix the paint right on the canvas, right on the brush. Don't try to spend a lot of time mixing specific colors on your palette. This is all background. It doesn't have to be any specific color. We're not trying to actually duplicate these trees in as a photograph would. We're trying to get a feel here in the distance that we have a whole lot of trees. And I take some of this yellow. I haven't cleaned this brush. I'm just taking paint on top of the brush, adding it in, not spending a lot of time debating over what the color is, analyzing the color or whatever. I'm just sort of pushing them in here. This brush I'm pushing it up, pushing down and pushing up. And you see I'm trying to create, hopefully it shows up well on the video, that I have a sort of a melodic line here. If you look along the top, it's not a smooth, it's not a straight line. It goes up, it goes down, wider gaps, narrower gaps. Change the color, change the width, change the height, change everything you can think of in here to make this background scene look like all the trees that are on a mountain, and as they're coming down, pretty much just putting in a base color in some of these areas right now to get it filled in. Around this church it gets very dark because it's in a shadow. There's a sort of a mountain this way, but the sun is coming in. The sun is actually hitting this part of the church, and it's going to be lit up very brightly. I'm going to light it up brighter than it is in the photograph even. So we have something really bright at the focal point, which is what we're trying to do. That is placed, if you remember my little discussions periodically on center of interest or focal point of a painting, we do them in thirds. The rule of thirds is you take your canvas this way and divide it thirds this way and thirds horizontally, and you try to put the focal point at one of those intersecting points, there, here, here, or here. So not always, but many times I try to focus it in the right quadrant of that rule of thirds layout, if you will. I'm just pushing up, making these trees look like a whole lot of different colors, a lot of different values back here. Values aren't changing that much. They're generally tending to be dark value, which is what my value plan, when I laid it out, indicated. I want this to be darker in the middle, light in the sky, middle tone in the foreground. We're going to have some other bushes in the foreground here. this area is more of a dark value. I'm going to darken up a little more as I go to the right. I'm going to pick up some of these purples over here and see if I can get some a little darker tone around this church. Yeah, there we go. I don't want to use black. I want to use a color that is mixed, and usually you can get a very dark color by putting alizarin in something. That darkens up a color. I use this violet, or I can use phthalo blue and get a very pretty dark color. Under this church, I'm going to try to do it with this filbert. It doesn't have the sharpest edge on it, but I'm going to try to put a little bit of dark in here like this. See the purples coming out? These are the shady parts of the forest that's down closer to the ground. And we repeat them up here in different places as well because there is a lot of shadow on these trees. Still haven't washed out this brush. I'm just mixing and remixing on the brush itself, picking up different colors, putting them on just as they come off the brush, however they turn out. This top line is telling you that I've got trees back there. As I change the color, you'll be able to tell that there's definitely fall is in the air. Trees are changing colors. Very beautiful time of the year in many parts of the United States. And it's where you are, you will find scenes like this as well, I'm sure. Unless you're in a part of the world that doesn't have 4 seasons, and then you have to look other places to see the color change in the fall. But this is always a highlight of the year for me. When the colors start changing, we start coming up with a lot of beautiful rust colors and oranges and I'll darken it up a little more, getting in some areas that should be in shadow again around this side of the church. See if I can do this with this filbert. It's not the best brush to use for this, but that's why I have this other little flat Tactron brush that I'm going to use to kind of fine tune around this church. But it's vertical strokes. These little pushing up with this brush basically gives me the feeling, the impression of dark woods back there. And I think it's showing up nicely on the video from what I can tell. We do have some nice big trees here in the middle ground that I'm going to come back and lay on top of this, but I want to sort of get this, all of this area in as much as I can here. Alizarin and a little of this ultramarine violet gives me some very interesting purplish, dark purple colored trees. Let's lay in a painting here, underpainting if you will. So it goes in very quickly. That, we got some nice orange areas in here that pop out. Some orange areas in here. have some dark areas actually over here, sort of in shadow. I can't tell you exactly what color this is because I'm letting it mix on the canvas. I'm actually using this violet color and putting it over the greens, and letting the brush and the canvas sort of do the work. I'm not trying for a photorealistic representation here. That's the key. I'm trying for an impressionistic view here of this scene. So I want this kind of be lighter back here. I'm going to have some trees and some tree trunks showing through here. So just swipe on some bright colors, put some cad yellow in there, lighten it up. We do have dark over here, as I said. All right, I'm getting a lot of that done. It's looking like a lot of trees that you might see in a mountain area like this. Some lighter colors here, ochres. Every time you put a darker color over a lighter color or vice versa, you add a layer of depth in the painting, which is what we try to do here by using these colors. And but it's about values. Value is what makes the depth. The color could be just about any color, as long as it's a color you'd see in nature for sure. Put a few highlights over here. We got some areas that are lighter on top of these trees. Sun's coming from the right, so let's flick in a few highlights here. I'm going to come back and do more highlights on this later. I just want to sort of help you see where this is going. Down here we've got some grassy area that's sort of in shadow, and then it sort of starts moving out. The actual grass area starts coming out. In here we got some very bright, some green grasses, we got some oranges, we got these leaves that are falling that are making a sort of a rusty color on the ground underneath where the trees are. Nice shadows, and then it sort of starts getting lighter in some areas. Now my brush, instead of going vertical, I'm going horizontal, and I'm actually painting the brush as if I were painting the grass underneath me. It's horizontal strokes. It makes the eye, again, we're using optical illusions here. It's fooling the eye to make the eye believe this ground is kind of going in a sort of angular valley-like shape. We're standing on a higher hill here. We're looking over some trees in the foreground, and these nice little changes in the grass help give us the feel that we're looking over a field of grass out here. And the angles that we put on this brush stroke will help tell the viewer, oh, that must be a whole nice field of grass. And then over here we start lightening up. We get some areas that are lighter. I'm going to put a little titanium white in this to sort of lighten it up, because the sun is hitting on some of this area here. Sun again is coming from our right, and as it hits on some of these areas, it really brightens them up. So let's put in some bright colors, put in some angles here. Change the color, add some darks. The change of the Might be a little too dark, but that's no problem. We can lighten it up. Oil painting is a very forgiving medium. It lets you make changes very readily. If you don't like it, you can always just scrape it off and start over. So these, I'm just taking ochre in some spots and just laying right over what's there. I still haven't cleaned this brush. I'm still using this brush with all the colors that I've had in it since I started this row of trees. Kind of one of my favorite little ways to paint lately is just using this filbert and letting it mix everything on the canvas. We're doing wet on wet anyway, so we're not trying to spend 4 hours doing this painting. We want to do it in something less than 2 hours for sure. I know the average view time on YouTube is about 10 minutes, so I really appreciate all these subscribers to my channel that watch and spend the time to actually see a full-length video. I do get a lot of comments thanking me for putting full-length videos out here. Not everyone will put a full-length video of a painting. Again, I could spend a lot more time doing some of these paintings, but I think the essence of what I'm doing and some of the ideas, the compositional ideas are valuable, and you can pick those up in a short painting session. We don't have to spend 4 to 6 hours. If I were doing a painting for a client or a gallery show, I would spend more time and have quite a bit more detail maybe than I actually put in one of these paintings, but you get the essence in very short order here. I'm lightening this up on the left side because I'm going to have sort of a dark tree in front of it, so I want to have the contrast here. Have a dark tree on the left side, and if you remember the photograph, we had a dark tree here and we had another dark tree sort of in this area. And then we had some light trees in here. So I'm going to put some dark behind where the light trees are going to go, lighter trees. And these are trees in the foreground that we're just sort of looking over as we take this photograph. So we'll darken up some areas here in the grass. Let's keep it. I'm just mixing whatever color feels good here. Down here, these colors can be about anything. Matter of fact, I may pick up a little liquid white and just sort of smooth it out, try to get it, cover it very quickly here. May even use my big brush, just put some liquid white on and get this part of the canvas covered very quickly. So I'm mixing the liquid white with whatever's on the canvas and just letting it sort of cover here. It's way too light. We're going to darken that down, but the liquid white gives me a underpainting coat here that I can actually easily move quicker. Basically, I want to say I can finish this painting faster than I would if I didn't use liquid white. There's other products you can use to get the paint to move faster or smoother. There's a medium called Liquin, L-I-Q-U-I-N, that many artists use. It also puts a oil type base on there and lets the paint flow very easily and quickly. And it helps the drying time. It actually tends to speed up the drying time a little bit in some areas. So you see how much faster I can put on a little tone on this canvas here with just having that liquid white underneath. Helps me a lot very quickly. So I have this entire canvas now covered, and we probably haven't been painting probably more than 30 minutes, I want to say. Yes, I think just not quite 30 minutes. So very quickly we've got a nice looking scene with room left for our little church there in the middle, and I'll come back and be doing more. There's some very beautiful trees here that are really standing out. They're really popping. So I'm going to see if I can get some of those. Let's get some of that in here. They're about right in this area here. I'm putting this paint on fairly thick. I've actually mixed up a batch of paint here that has cad red and yellow ochre, and I'm just kind of dabbing on, letting it come off, whatever will come off the brush, leaving a few sky holes in there. There's another one over here that's about the same color. I'm going to change the color of it just a little bit so it's not identical. We don't want to have clones, but we will have some couple of smaller trees here. There's some other areas that have this bright orange in them up here. So if I just let a little bit of this paint come off of the brush here on the tips, remembering that the sun is shining from the right, and it's going to hit on the right edge of these trees. So to lighten them up, we can put in some white, we can put in some yellow. So this is much thicker paint now. I'm just letting the canvas pull off a little bit of whatever's on my brush. Some other areas, little highlights here that are in the background that help things stand out. The tips of some of these, I think I did that a while ago. I hit the tips of some of these over here. It's all going to help this illusion of the sun really popping across here, hitting this church. When I start putting the colors on the church, you'll see that's a little bit too much going on there. So if I don't like it, I can always use my finger and sort of blend it out, soften it out a little bit. Come back and actually put in some darker colors over it to knock it down a little bit. The other area that needs to be softened really is the top line of these trees up here. I'm going to wash out my filbert brush for the first time. These are probably a little too bright. Dull them down just a little. The area I was talking about here at the top of these trees, we need to have some softness in here. So I'm going to just use my finger, sort of soften some edges on the tops of these trees. Don't want to do it everywhere, but wherever we do it, it's going to help give more distance to these trees. They're going to look like they're back further because they're sort of blurry. Over here maybe do some. See the tops, if you can see how the tops of that really get soft and fuzzy. It basically brings back makes it look like there's more depth in this painting. Sometimes we force the depth to be there by putting in some maybe bluish or lavender color trees in the distance. This is another way to help get that distance look. These trees in here, I don't really like that color too well, so I'm going to see if I can put a little more color in it to change them up a little bit here. There we go. All right. All right, we've got some nice things going on here. One of the things we always like to do is to take before we get too far along, is to put some tree trunks in the trees in the distance. So I usually like to do that by grabbing my script liner and getting some very liquidy like paint here by adding some thinner to it, just dipping the paint, the brush into the thinner and dipping it into the paint here and getting a nice sort of a brownish red liquid that I can use for trunks. So tree trunks here, maybe in the middle of this tree, would have some trunks like this. Take that brush and roll it, try to get a point on it if you can, and come in here and put in some. There's a lot of trees back here, and I want to show some of those trunks turning up. They don't have to be, not trying to make it look like a photograph, but I want it to look like a stand of trees back there. And this gives the impression of a lot of trees when you put some vertical strokes back here, and just leave them fairly light. Put them all across here like this. Get some on the other side over here maybe. Maybe a little darker here because of the background is darker. And actually we can use our knife to scrape out some areas back here. And show you how to do that. We've done that on previous videos, but you can always use a knife or a pointed edge of some kind to make some vertical scratches here. Look like some trees. Find a dark spot in there and just flick in some vertical pull up like this, and makes it look like trees with white trunks back there. Adds some more depth to your painting. The other thing I like to do sometimes is get a little dark paint on the edge of this brush or knife and actually draw some, just push up, and it adds some, looks like some trees that are like standing above the other trees that have maybe died or whatever. It adds a little more interest to that top edge. So we're getting that pretty well finished in. That's probably good enough. I can come back and now use my filbert and put in some just some light areas back there to help make this look like we got some depth in it back here, some greenery. The vertical flick ups like this will make it look like you got really kind of fuzzy depth in there. On the edges, I don't want a lot of detail over here on these edges. I don't know if I've talked about that or not, but you want to leave a border around your painting as much as you can so that it has it, when you put a frame on it, whatever, you don't end up with things tangent to the edge of the painting. Tangent means there'd be a tree right here at the edge, and time you put a frame on it that's like touching the tree. That's usually a no-no in most designs. I'm sure you will find artists that do that and put those things in very specifically, but it's not thought to be the best compositional layout if you do it that way. And of course, we know artistic rules are meant to be broken, so people will break the rules, and some will come out very nicely when they do that. I'm just sort of finishing up some of this background detail here. I may still want to put some more highlights on in a little bit, but right now I'm going to leave it at that. The sky, while we're there, why don't I just work on this sky? I'm going to try to get some colors here on my palette using white and my yellow. That's the color of the sun right there. Put some white down here. Put just a touch of red in it. And see if we can get sort of a white or pinkish color here. And try to put in some, probably too yellow. Put a little pink in this, make a sort of a peach colored cloud, I guess is one way to think about it. Putting this yellow, kind of turning those, turns that cloud a little bit too green for my liking. So let's come back and see if we can put some more white on there. There we go. Just lay in some interesting shapes here that look like there might be some clouds. Could use a knife for this, but right now I'm just using this filbert brush. Little clouds are floating around. Pick up some of this. I don't like that color too well. I don't think I got enough red in it is the problem. Need to make it a little pinker. Okay, something like this. Make these clouds sort of float. Yeah, they have a pinkish cast to them. That's what I want. I just want to make them look like that sun is really hitting them. Because that color is the color I want to put on the front of this church as well. So I'm going to echo that color in the sky. Okay. Something like that. Let's take a little bit of our black and get a little gray going here that we can put a shadow, a bit of a shadow underneath those clouds here like this. Something like that. String them out. Okay. All right, I'll see how that looks. I may come back and do a little more touch up on it, but I think it's looking pretty nice right now. Now I notice when I look at the video that this bright highlight I put on these trees here is really standing out. It's probably going to compete with this building over here when I start putting the color on that building, so I'm going to have to tone that down. But let's do that in a little bit. I'm going to get my 1/2 inch flat Taclon brush now, and I'm going to start working on this building over here. I think I mentioned I'm going to have this front of the building faces the sun. It's going to be sort of a white or pinkish color over here. Be careful I don't get my hand on the painting now. Okay. It's working pretty well. Picking up just a little red, a little pink. And because I've got this sharp edge brush, I can really put this in very sharply here. Almost like a watercolor painting, like I would do on a watercolor painting. Okay. Okay, now the other side, we start getting a little bit of sort of a bluish cast shadow here on the side that's not exactly in the sun. So I'm picking up this midnight black and mixing just a little grayed down color here in my palette, if you can see that. Same brush. Haven't washed it out, but I'm going to come in here and put in a gray color that's not far from the color of my canvas back there. A little variation in color. Put some nice paint down here. Okay. Whoops, I picked up some green. Didn't intend to do that. Pick a little tone that's in the middle here and sort of make this area that comes out from the shadow. There's an area on most buildings. Anytime you paint a building that's in shadow, wherever the plane changes, in other words, we're going from a plane that's facing the sun this way to a plane that's not facing the sun. You want to have this corner be the darkest. If you can make it the darkest. I'm trying to make that, and then I sort of want to blend it into the other colors I have here. That's the idea, like that. Okay, now this roof is going to be similarly situated. It's going to be a little lighter because it's actually getting light from the sky. So I'll see if I can make it a little lighter, maybe. This little sharp brush makes it all that much easier to make these. Now Bob Ross would probably try to do this with a knife, painting knife, and would not have nearly, he might have some sharp edges left from the paint dragging across, but it wouldn't necessarily be this sharp. Very difficult to get sharp edges in a oil painting. I have just a little shadow over here on this roof like this. So it's starting to come to life. Hopefully you can see that church appearing with some sharp edges. We have a little bit of a shadow under this eave. And I want to have a little shadow, as much of a shadow as it is just sort of a break right there. Here, all right. Okay, so I'm going to put just a little of this blue down here. Drag it across. Okay. All I have to do now is to do that top of the steeple. I'm going to go back and get some of my white here that's very similar to what I have on that front of the church. Faces the sun. See if I can do this steeple without getting my arm in the painting. Something like this. And something like this. Okay. It's pretty close. Put a little marker in there to indicate we've got some architectural element there, here, This actually goes at an angle. I'm right on top of this. I'm really looking at it very closely. I hope I'm not blocking the video so much it's not usable, but I want to keep that light color. And actually, if you had smaller brushes, you would use a smaller paintbrush to do some of this with, but I'm trying to stick with the brushes that we have in our class, so that I'm a little bit restricted, but not too bad. Had to pick up a piece of paint there, and I messed up my other wall here. Okay. Just touch in a little, something like that. All right, now I've got an area around that that's not, around that steeple that's not painted in, the background area. So I'm going to try to see if I can get this dark color I had. I'm going to use my same sharp edge brush and see if I can come in back around that to finish off that edge from the other side, from the dark from the dark side. Over here, something like this. Down this side, this is the tedious part. Just want the canvas to be covered. Here we've got a little bit. I'm just painting the background now around the back of this church. Trying to get it as sharp an edge as I can. And still preserve the look of trees back there. Pick up a little of my lighter colors and maybe strike those in. Okay. All right. Might be a little too bright. All right, so let's see here. We got some light in here that I want a little bit too light. The sun is sort of hitting this part of the land. Putting in the light helps the dark show. Putting in the dark helps the light show. So you want to make that land look like it's getting lit up by the sun. I think that's working. Okay. We've been going for not quite an hour. And I think this is a good time to put in those windows around the church. So we've got, use my script liner again. I'm working on that church. I'm going to just put a few vertical strokes to represent windows in the side and in the front. I want this to be very thin paint again, very much like we did with those trees in the background. Get plenty of thinner on here. Roll the brush, get a point, and then try to pop in about 3 windows along here if I can. There's 1, 2, 3. I finally lost the paint there on that 3rd one. There we go. Just, they don't have to be perfect. Put a couple over here. I think we had maybe a couple on this end. There's actually a couple of dark spots in here. This is open. And that's about fine enough. We actually have some shadows on that tree or on the face of that church from a tree that's over here actually casting some very light. I don't know if I'm going to put that in. I'm going to hold off on that a minute. Put in a few more trunks back here while I got this dark going. All right. See how that looks. All right, that's probably well over half done. Mostly I have the foreground and a few more details in those trees, and I'll have her finished. Okay, I want to see if I can fix this little section of background here behind the this needs to be a little clear. It's not quite sharp enough for me. There we go. Alright, let's sharpen it up just a little. Okay, let's see if I can sharpen this up a little bit here. There we go. Okay. Pretty good. Alright, I think that's all I want to do with that church. I'm going to leave it alone and work on the a little more on these trees here. These are just a little bit too bright. I want to tone them down just a little. Still have the look of sun hitting them. It doesn't have to be quite that bright. I don't want it to be as bright as the church is, because I don't want them to compete with the center of interest, but I want it to show that there's light hitting. A few more spots in here maybe, just to lighten up some of it. Excuse me. A little bit of yellow, this cad yellow, this color I put in the sky is going to help lighten up the, just show the sun is hitting on some other trees back in here, across the tops of some of these. A little bit of that goes a long way, so we don't want to do too much, but we want to make sure that it stands out. Okay. Yeah, back in here I want it just a little brighter maybe. It's a bit too bright, but let's darken it up a little bit. Okay. These areas have to be darker in here. Alright. I think I have some shadows in this area over here that I'm going to put in. That church is really making a nice bit of a shadow. This brush picks up a lot of the paint underneath very quickly. There's actually a couple of bushes in front of that church. I may come back and put those in if I don't forget. But if I forget, well, still looks pretty decent, I think. Alright, back to my I'm going to use my filbert again here. We've got a tree that kind of comes up in this area. It's a fairly dark tree. I'm going to start with the trunk and sort of put it in here. It's sort of like pretty thick trunk. A bit too much. I'll go back and hit that with my big brush, and I'll fine tune that out of there. I'm going to get my big landscape brush now. This is really great for making a lot of bushes. Brush. If you load it right and use it right, you can get some really neat. You get some dark. This tree here on the left has got a lot of green. I'm mixing alizarin and satin green in my big landscape brush. I'm going to put a little bit of ochre in there. So right here I'm going to just kind of put in, covering up that big old trunk that I stuck in there. That's not quite dark enough. A little more of this ochre. Use a lot more paint when you use this big landscape brush, but just tapping it in. There's a lot of stuff over here that this is a typical stippling method that you've all seen Bob Ross use, I'm sure, if you've watched any of his videos. Picking up darks and lights, yellows, getting all kinds of colors in here. Get some oranges in here. How about that? There we go. Get this red and mix it up with Indian yellow. Cover a lot of canvas very quickly with this big brush. I'll come back and use my filbert maybe and fine tune it a little bit and get me some of this violet and alizarin and get some shadow colors in here. Yeah, there's some darks in some places. Just pound it in. Picking up yellows and actually the way I remember Bob Ross loading his brush, he'd always load it on one edge by pulling up on it. Then he turned that edge over, and that's what he would use to sort of pop in these really bright colors here. Come back and get some yellows, put over it. You don't want this foreground to be all that super interesting because whatever you put in here is going to take away from that, from the center of interest. So we kind of just want to make this a little bit boring, a little bit nondescript in here. This is just a lot of bush and brush and some few trees sticking up, but pretty much nothing too specific. You have some bright yellow trees sticking up there. And if I keep pounding this and keep pounding it like this, it will all turn to mud. So you have to know when to stop, when to hold them, as the poker players say. Know when to fold them. So I think it's time to stop with that. I'm going to come back now and see if I can put a A little more texture in there with my filbert brush, but not a lot. If I get the too much interest in this foreground, it will compete and take the viewer's eye away from the center of interest. So we don't want that, but we do want some nice looking bushes in here with some highlights on them. And I'll just sort of push this up and point it toward the church. So whatever highlights I have in here, I will sort of use the top of this brush and just push them like this. There is some greens floating around in there. And maybe a few more dark greens with this phthalo blue here. Phthalo blue is a very potent color. There's some green in here. Just scumble some stuff in here. Darken up this corner a little bit. Pick up some darker shadows, grays. Put some violet in here. The violets will give me a shadow color, so I can get some three-dimensional look to these trees, sort of form them up a little bit so it looks like there is some actual trees in here. Not real heavy, but just enough to give a third value. You have a medium value, a dark value, and a light value. And by using these colors, get a mixture of them all in there. And that helps the three-dimensionalness of these bushes if you can just get more than two values. One value looks very flat and very boring. Two values looks like it's not complete. If you can get three values in there, you'll start seeing three-dimensionality, which is really what we're trying to do with some of this. There's a darker color. Putting in some. So, kind of painting this as a very abstract foreground. Picking up all these different colors that are here and making a very abstract set of bushes that don't really look like any specific bush, but they're definitely something that would be in the leg in this area. But minimize the detail, minimize the and minimize the contrast. Try to get three values without getting a very dark. Sorry folks, I just realized my main microphone was not plugged in. I've been painting for probably 10 or 15 minutes and talking away, and you probably didn't hear much of what I said. I do have another camera that has audio on it, so I'll see if I can pick up that audio, and if I can, I will overlay that audio. But the main microphone, I realized was not was turned off actually. So you may have missed out some of my discussion about what I was doing here, but hopefully I can pick it up off of the other camera and put it in this video when I edit it. I was just really trying to fill in this whole area here with some foliage and some trees. There's some interesting foliage here that I wanted to display, and it kind of sets the scene back by making these large items in the foreground like this, it really helps give the painting depth and makes the church look like it's further back in the painting, which is what we're trying to do. And so there's another bright tree that sort of sticks up over here. Not too bright. It's getting sun from the right side, and getting a little darker tone on the back side of it here. We'll put that second value in. And maybe if we can get a darker value yet, I'll put some blue in there and see if we can get a third value in here. There we go. Okay, so not too detailed, not too specific, but just make some nice abstract shapes in here. Abstract shapes. Don't leave 2 inches of your canvas without something going on in there. You either have to have a value change or directional lines like I have in this area out here. That's pretty much all I want to do in that foreground, because I want your focus to really go toward the church. And if you look at that church, whatever's in the foreground is blurry to you anyway, blurry to your eye. So it's not going to be very, very distinct. So I don't want to paint it that way. If you try to paint as the eye sees, instead of what the photograph gives you, the photograph will give you everything in sharp detail, which is a big mistake people make trying to paint from photographs. They try to paint everything with all this detail, and your eye doesn't see that way. If you close your eyes and or if you squint your eyes and look at the focal point, you will only see the focal point, and everything else around will be blurred. And so that's the reason for leaving a border kind of around the painting that's not very detailed and specific. You want things to look fairly abstract. I'm just putting in a few trunks here in this tree on the left. I'm going to put a few trunks showing in some of these areas here to sort of tie this together and help tell the story that this is a series of trees and combinations of things. But again, if I took the time to paint a very detailed tree in here, it would detract from the overall painting itself or overall focus. And so I'm just going to kind of hit and miss, throw in some vertical streaks that look like they belong as part of these trees that are sitting out there. There are a lot of trees, a lot of bushes in here. Just scrape in some things that kind of help tie it together. And this is really thin paint. I've got a lot of thinner on here from my script liner, and just pulling down some dark paint into it to sort of give me a very loose and runny paint. Should kind of stick a couple of things over here that maybe help point to the focal point a little more. If I can get enough thin paint on this brush, I'll finish it up. Something like this. My brush is not sticking together very well. The points splay out sometimes and they don't stay tight when I paint with them, and I end up with these little double lines here that I don't like. So I'll just go back over it till I get it right. There we go. I did say there was some shadows on that church from some trees. So let's see if I can put some just slightly. As I finish here, I'm going to see if I can put in just ever so lightly. I'm going to take some black and white, get myself a gray mixture here. thin it down so that it's like ink. It's got to be darker than that, the surface of the church, but not so dark that it's too distracting. So I'm getting a whole bunch of paint here, loose paint, and I'm going to draw in a couple of things that look like there might be some tree shadows on here. Something like that. Just some little things that, there's some trees out here that are reflecting on it. It helps give the idea that there's trees in front. I hope that shows up on the video. It's a little bit light from what I can tell, but it just helps enhance that painting a little bit. There is a little bush right there that I'm chosen to leave out. Down here, I think there's a little darker border at the bottom. Just be careful, I don't want to mess this up. It looks so nice right now. I'm just going to leave it alone if I can. Tell myself to stop. I usually have somebody in my class yell out stop when it's time to stop. Make that dark under that eave. Okay, that's fairly sharp. I like that. Okay, I think I'm going to stop and call that finished. Hopefully I'll be able to get the audio back from where my microphone was turned off. But I kind of like the way that looks. Has a nice fall feel. So I will zoom back here and tell you thanks for watching. I'm glad you're with me again, and I hope you keep tuning in. I'll keep putting videos out. And until I see you again, this is Larry Hamilton signing off. See you soon. Bye.